Welcome back to Rad MMA. My name's Connor and this is Yaz, and today we're going to be going over our ranges. It's going to be really easy to understand, a super quick video for you, but it's so important to know if you're going to be getting into sparring, if you're going to be doing competitions. If you don't understand your range, it's a lot harder to strategize and know where you should be and when you're fighting with whatever opponent is in front of you. So let's get into it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're into this type of content, and I appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to be going over 3 different ranges here: close, mid, and far, in a really easy way to understand where you're at and when. Okay, so just to start, when Yazzy's in her fighter stance in front of me, we're going to start from our far range. So far is more or less if I need to take a step in to land any strike. If we're thinking about kickboxing, this might be the fullest extent of how far we can throw some of our kicking strikes, like our front kicks and maybe some of our low kicks. But in general, we would need to take a step in if I wanted to land any punch, and that's that distance. So it'll be maybe an extra forearms distance away. It's kind of the way I like to think about it. She could take a step in and hit me. I could take in a step to hit her, but there's still an additional piece of footwork that needs to happen if we want to land anything, right? Our second range to understand is mid, right? And this is probably the most important range to understand. And the reason why I'm just extending my lead hand out here, it's basically the extent of your lead hand all the way out, right? That's our measuring stick. That lets me know that she is 1 arm's distance away from me. And it's the reason why fighters are constantly touching with their jab. They're lining up their shots. They're trying to figure out how far or how close their opponent is from them and what kind of reactions we can get out of our opponent. So, right, again, it's my lead hand fully extended, and it's a range where I can basically hit any strike that I wanted to hit. My hooks, my uppercuts, my straights, knees, low kicks, right? I could even hit some in tight front kicks, but really it's the most dangerous place for you to be in terms of our opponent attacking us, but it's also the best place to be in if you want to be attacking your opponent. So we can consider this the riskiest range to be in. Our next range to understand is close, and that's just about, right, if I started here for my mid, this would be my close, which would be an elbow's distance away, right? Just about right here. And from this position, it's pretty hard to hit some of my longer range strikes, right? With my straights, my jabs, my crosses, my front kicks, they're not really an option here anymore. But all of my hooking punches, my uppercuts, my hooks, right, my body shots, right, knees, all of those sorts of strikes are very, very available to strike. It's not quite a clinch, so you don't want to consider yourself tangled up or connected to your opponent, but close enough where we're almost forehead to forehead while throwing these punches. And that would be our mid-range. For me, right, if we're thinking about strategy, let's assume Yazzie is very tall. She's 6'5", she's leaning over top of me. I don't want to be in her mid-range because everybody's ranges aren't exactly the same, right? And that's not just to do with how long their arms are or how tall they are, but what type of style of fighter they are. So if I was going to describe my strategy in terms of ranges for you guys, a lot of the time I like being either too close in that really in tight range, right, or too far away. I don't really like hanging out in the mid-range all too much because that's where brawlers like to be. Guys who like making, in tight blocks and throwing back shots right away and maybe are a little bit more comfortable with dealing with a little bit more punishment to throw their shots back. That's not like a hard rule for people who hang out in that range, but in general, like I said, if you're in the mid-range, you're in the riskiest position. There's a lot of punches that can be thrown and can be thrown back at you. So, right, let's say if she was really, really tall, I would be on the outside of her range. So I would be out here the entire time and figuring out my ways to close the distance, attack on the inside, and then get back out to far again. So this is a simple way that we can play with range and understanding strategy. And you guys could implement, right, these ideas for yourselves. So let's say you're working with someone who's really, really chaotic. Same sort of idea. I stay on the outside, right? I let them sort of burn themselves out, start to slow themselves down, or, right, start to open themselves up into more dramatic strikes to try to catch up with me on the outside, right? And then I wait for my moment to close the distance where I feel in control on the inside, right? Or land a counter in the mid-range and then go back to being in far. And that's a lot of time how more sniper-like kickboxers will use their ranges. But this is something that you should be thinking about when you're sparring with somebody or working with a new opponent that maybe you haven't before. Another thing that we could think about in terms of ranges, not all close, mid, and far ranges are equal. Again, if I'm shorter or if I'm taller than my opponent, our close and our mid range are going to look a lot different. So again, right, I'm a little bit taller than Yazzie. If she holds her lead hand straight out in front of her, right here, right, mine is obviously a little bit further than hers. Right. So if she's in my mid-range, usually I'll have a little bit of the upper hand. It's going to be harder for her. She's going to have to reach a little bit further for her to land her shots versus me. Right? But if she gets in close, maybe she has a little bit of the upper hand. She's underneath me. It's harder for me to squeeze my punches in because my arms are longer and I'm bigger than she is. Again, these aren't hard rules, but again, it's just something that we can think about going forward when we're doing our spars. Right? Being strategic in fighting could be boiled down to just thinking about pattern recognition. So we recognize a pattern. She's has a pattern of being too close, and that's where she's most dominant, right? We can work ourselves out of that position and fight in a range that we're a lot more comfortable in. So if you learned something in this video, make sure you like it and subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for helping Yaz. And thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time, and thanks.